Well, it's now 20 minutes to 8 o'clock, las 8 menos 20 minutos, Mr. Troy. ¿Y cómo pasa el tiempo, verdad?
Yes, time flies indeed.
Pasa el tiempo muchísimo y tenemos aquí a don Arturo Lizarraga con nosotros, del Better Business Bureau, ¿no?
Belize
Business Bureau. They used to name Better once upon a time, right?
No, man, that's the States. You're thinking about the United States. There's a thing that they call Better Business Bureau in the States.
So you're like Belize Business Bureau, the BBB.
Yes, the person who gave the name was Rosalie Staines.
I remember.
I helped with the charter. I drafted the charter.
That's why I remember the Better.
You used to be a member. A very active member.
Or take after the B, the first B. Anyway, we
It's B4B.
Yeah, it's B4B.
Better Belize Business Bureau.
That's right.
Okay.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
You're right,
Yes, you were very active.
So I remember the Better.
There was a time when they were kicking up dust. They were in Washington, New Orleans,
yes,
promoting investment, and you know.
I remember those days.
Well, now it's back, and it's back in terms of to serve its real purpose, which is to develop the productive sector, industrial sector, and to focus on providing self-employment through entrepreneurship. You know. That's the solution.
Tell us who you are and what you are and what is back.
Well,
in terms of size and the
what is back? How much size is back?
The Business Bureau was started in the 90s, and mid-90s the charter was passed. You remember the rift between a group in the chamber, and I was the one who was trying to negotiate with Hugh and Rosalie in between, trying to get them to pacify and move ahead. No? But finally they decided they'll provide a charter, and the Business Bureau was very active at one time. In fact, we won the first Senate with Fred Hunter because we had more members at the time than they had. But as the time went on,
why was there a rift? Just for people to understand the history.
In the chamber,
what was the
chamber
reason for the rift?
The chamber, according to the members,
chamber mean the Belize Chamber of Commerce,
had misspent the U.S. aid money, and they were accusing the management at the time of misallocation of funds and non-transparency, etc. And so that a group of them broke away, trying to get the honesty out of the organization.
So they were in the office up on Regent Street, right?
Right. He had got a tremendous amount of money from the U.S. aid. So that was the crux of the matter. But that has gone on, no? And what has happened the last 10 years with the Bureau is that Misael Flores was against the nationalization, and he said so, and the Prime Minister at the time attacked him because he said he was the brother of Flores, who was the CPA for Ashcroft at the time. And what he did was systematically remove the Bureau officials from all... Hold on, man, you asked me a question.
Yeah, but now you call no name, the names then, because then I don't want to get yourself in trouble.
No, but I'm saying that the government took the members off the Bell Trade Board, off the DFC Board, and even with the Economic Council, you notice that it was only the chamber for 12 years. You know, they're actually creating a new organization to represent another organization to make it appear fair. But the fact is we're alive and well, and lots of people would want to deny that we're not, but we are. And we're the ones coming up with ideas. And we're the ones who have younger people with more progressive notions as to how we should proceed.
I'm going through this because of the history.
How many members there right now?
Well, I would venture to say we are just on the same par with the chamber in terms of active members. You know, well, if you ask the chamber, they give you a number, I give you one. You know, that's a game that the government used to play. Well, the Bureau now have no members, the chamber, there are only one with members, and the media, continue to fabricate that myth, no?
Well, because not correct it.
No.
Because if you tell me,
once you correct it, we have the correction.
If you give a number, they have to say.
That's how it's concerned. We'll have it. The media are correct what they're supposed to correct. Once we say something about you and you don't like it.
What I would think would be useful to do is to come to our an annual general meeting, and then see who all show up and see who all participate.
When will that be?
When
will be the next?
We're having a summit in July, a business summit in July, and the next general meeting should be, if not late in the year, early in the year, like January, February of next year. But
But more or less, membership how much?
I think actively we're running about 120.
That's the figure
But
talk about.
But they're more on the books, you know. They have more people registered, but you know that it's not.
You said active, meaning people who are actually contributors.
Well, we don't charge.
Charge a fee.
No, we don't charge a fee. We don't charge a fee.
Oh, okay.
It is when you know it's active. It's people who respond, who come up with ideas, who ask queries.
How you manage the
It's a voluntary thing. It's a.
Okay.
We don't have.
So you don't have an office and so.
We don't have. Yes, we do have. There's a one tree on Barracks Road. What happened is that Mr. Flores gives us a space, you know, and so he's a proprietor and stuff like that. And that occurs. People contribute, you know, they contribute time, they contribute resources, but the idea is to advocate for businesses, and unfortunately, a lot of small businesses went under during the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Correct me though, if we're wrong, because
we came here for the economy, no?
We're trying to establish first the organization, so that there's the credence of what we talk about, because the chamber have their views, the Belize Business Bureau will have their views, other entities will have their views. So when they establish the credential of the individual, and you being the president, then clearly that's where we're trying to work this issue from. But I wanted to make a clarity so that again, for our listeners, the Belize Business Bureau speaks, in my mind, from earliest stage, or what I recall, is that there was a concern that the Chamber of Commerce had a big focus on merchandising and merchants, and not so much on the productive sector. And what I understand, the breakaway outside of, or maybe in addition to what you've said, is to do a lot more focus on the productive sector, where the Belize Business Bureau is putting a lot of its focus. So most
That's
of
accurate.
your original members.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
That perception is accurate, because if you read both of the charter, the focus is on the productive sector. You add value, you export. It's also on, for example, the Chamber is an international organization. They represent trade all over the world. It's founded on an interest for the U.S. to penetrate markets. But the Business Bureau perceives itself to be more national. We're interested in having Belizean ownership, in Belizeans being able to make something, sell it, you know, and export it. So in that sense, you're right, and it's more accurate. So we're less inclined to fight for the importer, you know, for the persons who, unfortunately, the colonial system always favored the importer. So revamping the tax system is a very top priority for us, so that the producer can have the same advantage. For example, it's unfair that you import a ketchup with zero tax, and then the guy who's trying to make a ketchup, and you know this experience from the brother, the Richardson, who tried to produce. You know, you pay for the bottle. Harrison, you pay for your taxes on everything. You know, it's unfair. It doesn't create employment. You know, so those are the things that makes us different.
Yeah, the Belize Business Bureau got into the news between late last week and certainly early this week, as it relates to a piece of correspondence.
Yeah.
That the government found themselves in a position that they had to defend themselves, because for some reason it was then perceived that this was something that the government had agreed to do in conjunction with Belize Business Bureau based on that letter that I think you had signatured. Give us a sort of impetus of where that whole thing came from, and how you justify what you put in the letter, so that people can appreciate that it came from a point of credence and not just a whim and fancy.
One of the things that all organizations do is they consult with membership. And you have drafts of different things going out, and you get feedback until you finally arrive at an official position to give the government. And there are various different things that were circulating among the members. I don't know who, because we have all types of members, red, blue, green, in fact, a lot of green. And so I don't know who released the letter as if though it is an official position, but the official position with the Prime Minister is a simple one. The Prime Minister had the consultations. At that meeting, we made a lot of recommendations, which it's reflected in the addendum that we had. And we made it right then at the table. And some of them I wish we could talk about. And so the official position, we knew, right, that the government had not taken any official position. Whether it was 20, as the Guardian was suggesting, whether it's 15, or 10, there was no official position. It was a matter of consultation. People were asked to give their views on it. One of the things that is clear is that we're in a really bad state. Okay. I was just talking to Chief, and Chief saying he's operating with 30% less people. And the government has 30% less revenue. There is no way the government can sustain itself. We won't even talk about the debt, which is 135%. Crazy. We're just going to talk about operation, just to keep the door open. You can't operate with 30% of your revenue gone and pretend that nothing. So it's a tough choice. You either send home people, and if you do 30% of 16,000, you get 4,800 people. But you can't fire the people. The last thing you need to do is fire a teacher. It doesn't make no sense. So it's the problem there is you have to do something. And the best way, we believe, and the most practical way, is take a pay cut. And we believe that the ministers should lead by example and take the equal pay cut. If they decide, I have an allergic thing to leprosil, so getting a reaction.
And coughing on air.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Is not going to be seen as kosher.
Yeah. But so that was the essence of the discussion. That something must be done, and maybe the best way is to take a pay cut. No, but
that's a recommendation.
That came from you guys. That wasn't the government.
No, that wasn't the government. That was
the government even acknowledging that had any merit.
That came from you.
No. What happened is that we suggested, because it's not just cutting pay. We won't solve the problem by cutting pay or sending home people. We need to increase private sector activity. We need to increase investment and job creation.
How?
Well, like we said, simple thing. And I'm glad
people from Melchor want us to go over there.
But you have to understand, Troy, that you touched on a little bit of it this morning. People don't understand. We're selling them cattle and pork. They don't pay us in US dollars, they pay us in Belize dollars. How did we get the Belize dollars? By the economy, by the business that they do. So
who pays in Belize dollars? The Guatemalans?
Guatemalans. A lot of the trade.
Well, I wouldn't know what currency. I would assume they pay us in US currency, because
no man, that's
74 million. The industry, my understanding from the authorities, is 74 million, but it's not something I want to quibble about in terms of what currency they're paying.
But it's important because
once you earn money, you earn money.
It's important because people in the country, and the bureaucrats especially, do not understand. We're in this liquidity crunch. Foreign exchange, we're down to 4 months, and we need for pay. And what people don't understand, that all of this thing is dynamic.
We're always low. We're never above 3.5 months.
So the reason the Guatemala border is hot is because they need these dollars if they want to continue to buy from us. And we also have a situation where we buy steel from them, etc. One of our recommendations was allow Belize to accept, the banks to accept pesos and quetzal. What would that do? It allows you to shift away from the U.S. dependency. Now
How you under that?
But that is very simple.
I don't want to this discussion about this kind of academic discussion, because I think it's going to be meaningless to our people.
No.
But let me just interject this, because I think it's important to interject this. Is that, as far as we are concerned, trade is occurring between the two countries. The borders are not closed for trade. It's only closed for the movement of people.
Right.
But it's not even close to the point that you can't go. If there's a medical emergency
then you can.
You can get the permission to go across. The fundamental issue right now is that you do have trade, and I think we need to establish that. if I want to bring steel from Guatemala, if I want to bring cement from Guatemala, I am allowed to do that. The borders are open for trade.
Yes, but there's a little bit of difficulty in Guatemala right now on the Guatemalan border.
Another thing you guys need to take into account is the amount of jobs that have been saved in Belize because of the fact that the money is not going over there.
Very important point.
So a lot of small businesses in Belize have been kept afloat and would have otherwise gone under. You know, small and medium.
But I encourage that. I'm with that.
Gone under had the borders been left
open.
open.
You see what happened right there when the free zone opened. 800 people immediately got employed.
Well, you know what?
Exactly.
You know what I love
we got
about
to keep the dollars working at home.
What I love about this is that people don't understand. When I promoted the free zone and I was very instrumental in terms of establishing the free zone, one of the arguments I was making before they actually envisioned that Mexicans would come was that this could be a strategy for development. And so I felt fantastic that the free zone was the turning point in terms of reactivating the economy, because at one point we were 18% of GDP. But let's move the argument further. Chetumal has become a free zone. The WTO has a condition that we should charge taxes on people, on Belizeans, and allow them to shop. It's one line in the act that says you have to get permission from the Ministry of Finance. All you have to do is remove that line and allow, like when I was the first CEO, allow Belizeans to go into the free zone and shop and pay their duties. That's another way we would expand the jobs.
But isn't that what we're doing right now in the custom territory? We're shopping and paying the duty, import duty.
But I'm just saying.
Is that what we're doing right now?
You raise the issue with the free zone. I'm just saying.
No. But I said when they open and the Mexicans are allowed to come across.
What I was suggesting is that Chief was alluding to the fact that if people go across the border, they will spend money there, and it's better we let them spend it here. So I'm just using that as an example, that instead of having them to go to Chetumal, we just add that feature, and then we collect even more money.
But there wouldn't be an incentive for them to go into the free zone then, because if they're going to be paying the same price that they pay here,
but they're not.
Then there are no incentives.
The price
so then
different.
You're depriving the domestic.
They have to pay duty. If the duty is correct, duties are charged up to the same.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because
right now the bar can keep. I just use that as an example. Or Brody's or CFU or Rab can keep their employees at maybe 100% or 90%. Because those persons are not going over the
and if you want something, you got to go to these stores. You know?
And so you need to go over there. So
but you can't. You don't want to free zone for everything.
We have to be very, very careful.
But you don't go to free zone for everything.
You don't create a hysteria in people's mind that put pressure on the government to open up the free zone for us to go there to the detriment of their own tax-paying business.
That's the same argument that Sancas made when Esquivel was establishing the free zone. And you know what happened?
It's a valid position.
But you know what happened? Brody's established itself, Sancas established itself. All at Arbor Street are people in the free zone. The same owners that own Arbor Street.
Nothing wrong with that. It's taking, because it's a new set of clientele. They are seeking to
they are bringing money from outside.
That's a form of export. That's fine. They are bringing in the product here, employing Belizeans, because one of the biggest things that people get from investment is employment.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things the country gets is employment. When you put 3,000 people working now in the free zone, because Brody's and Sancasa, whoever set up in the zone, to export those items over to Chetumal, because that's what they're doing when people are coming from Mexico to buy. That's an export.
Let's look at the statement you just made. Investment. The problem, the crisis we have right now, right? Because there are two different crises. The economic disaster that happened over the course of 10 years didn't happen overnight.
Okay, I'm glad
and the other one is the COVID collapse, which is a different kind of situation.
Right.
But both of them are affecting us.
And you talk about the economic disaster first. How that happened?
Well, it happened very simple. The government hid the facts that every year, you know that in 10 years, we went from 7,500 in per capita GDP to almost 5,000, a 30% drop in 10 years of the value of what we have in the money in our pockets. The media never say anything about it. The Prime Minister would go and present a budget.
You never said about it, no,
because I didn't know. But I've been talking about this for the last 4 years. That the economy is in crisis. But let's go back.
It's a very good point you're making from the standpoint
that
misinformation has always been the order of the day as it relates to the economy of this country.
I agree.
And the politicians use it to confuse us.
And hurt us.
When it suits them, they put crowd out there, roll it with Petrocarib, and let's face it, all the organization did not. The chamber, the Belize Business Bureau, and so did not make it clear that these were debt. This was loans that we were just spending willy-nilly, knowing full well at some point in time we'll have to pay back these things. And then when the chicken come home to roost now, basically the Prime Minister walks off into the sunset and say, who come next? Too bad.
The flood.
Too bad, but we got to take a break because we have our own economic issues to deal with. So we take a break and we come right back.
The following is a paid political
work from day till night. Get up every morning, life go to work from day till night. I got 7 big feet and one on the way. That's the way that I always need. What a beautiful day, good morning, Billy. What a pretty day, good morning, Billy. With the troubles away, good morning, Billy. Get up every morning, life go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, life go to work from day till night. That's what party ticket to pay, and no money there. Whoever tell me picnic this tree. What a beautiful day, good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day, good morning, Billy. With the troubles away, good morning, Billy.
Well, it's now 7 minutes past 8 o'clock, las 8 de la mañana con 7 minutos. Y buenos dias, good morning, Belize, and thanks for choosing love on a beautiful Wednesday morning. Today is Troy's Day.
Hump day.
Troy has his own day, you know. He call it a hump day.
Hump day.
So,
Right, yeah.
so it's whiskey and beer today.
I don't know,
Yes.
I think he'll have
No,
to tomorrow.
We're getting ready to
Just
go
to get
into
ready
the
for it.
birthday for love.
Congratulations on your 28th birthday, love.
Thank you so much.
I know you've labored hard
Yeah, it's been a interesting ride.
and you made the dream real.
Yeah.
And for that, I think it's something that all entrepreneurs wish for, and few get to make the dream real for so long.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome,
Deeply
Chief.
appreciate it.
Yep. Well, we're talking with the president of the Belize Business Bureau, Mr. Arturo Lizarraga. And so if we could just zero in now on the recommendations
Right.
that
That
the Belize Business Bureau
made
is
to-
making to the
to
government.
the government.
The key issue there, you had raised the issue, Troy, of investment. And one of the first things, there are two or three things we opened the meeting with, and I share this because, it's not a privileged thing. We were concerned, there's no point in going to an IMF because the IMF will tell you to fire anyway. So that's no point. There's pointless trying to promote
The
an
IMF come to us
Right.
for the Article 4.
Right. So that we clear that off the table, and the Prime Minister assured us that we weren't going down that road, and we didn't expect to go down that road. So I'm glad that was cleared. Then the other big issue was this excess $400 million of liquidity that's in the banks that's sitting there, and the poor people starving, and we don't have access to this
And
money.
the bank have the money.
And the bank have the money. So we believed, and we asked the government how they plan to address it. One of the responses was that they would reduce the risk-weighted average from 100 to 50%, and that will allow the banks a little bit flexibility to move ahead. But you are aware of the 2008 crisis that Obama had and how he got the banks together, and he made sure that a lot of money got back into the system. So I believe that the unions should pressure the government for us to pressure the banks to release the 400 million into the system.
But wait a minute.
Yes.
What happened in the United States is different from what is happening in Belize.
I understand.
They injected money in. You're asking the bank to take depositors' money and take it out.
No, but they're not. It's not like they're not getting paid. The banks are making money.
No, but
they'll
the
capitalize.
bank will tell you two things. I don't have qualified borrowers. I don't have willing borrowers. Because let's
First
face
thing you
it,
touch is qualified borrowers.
the bank is a business, and if they have people out there who are prepared to borrow, who are qualified, they want to make their interest because it is costing them to hold that money. Depositors are making a small fee now. Yes, it's very small in terms of their return, but it is the people's money. It's their customers' money.
What is funny here is that instead of the interest rate is going down, the interest rate is going up. But let's not get into
spread.
the spread. So I'm saying to you is that whole argument about qualified buyers is a whole thing about collateral, etc., etc. The point is that there is excess liquidity, and that is one factor that could be used. So
No,
that
but what I don't want what I'm saying is, and there are a lot of people who are listening from a layman's standpoint as well as people who are knowledgeable. I want it to be clear to our people. It's not just a simple willy-nilly 400 million, and then you just open up the vault and the money flies out, and that helps. But I want to make it clear that what you're suggesting is that there's the possibility of the bank having the ability now to lend more.
Exactly.
And they're putting that. But the bank is saying to all and sundry who wants to hear, I don't have those clienteles that you're talking about. I don't have the people to be able to put that money out there.
Then you need to get out there and find them and
hold on. But it went further than that. Let me just add this in quickly. It went further than that. I think the government recognizes it, that the point is that the piece of legislation recently passed in relation to the central bank is to be able, in reference to $10 million availability, so that there's a possibility that they can allow the bank to be a little bit more freer.
And I also believe, in extension to that argument that's going to the Senate and the House, that the National Bank is underutilized in the whole scheme of things.
Well, you know, the image of it is not there at all.
But it doesn't matter. It's the institution is there. It's a new government. They can make it a more robust.
It's not properly promoted.
I agree with you.
It's not top of mind then.
That's why we have love.
Well,
but we knock on the door and let them spend some money. And so what I'm suggesting is that we put stuff on the table that are easily identifiable. But there are other issues that we brought up. For example, how on earth you go to a big shop, don't get a receipt, and if you get it, it fades away. Why can't we digitize GST so that every day they know what they need to collect, and let them stop paying their suppliers with cash? That's where the leakage occurs. And let them repay it electronically. I believe there's a gap. There's about $60 million gap in customs. There's an extraordinary gap in terms of GST, in terms of the same people that we were talking about, the importers. So we need to patch those gaps up, and quickly. For example, how do we deal with the customs issue? If you digitize, you eliminate, or at least you minimize the intervention of the custom officer. For example, we don't have a illicit enrichment act because some of them have, I understand, one custom officer have 35 apartments, you know. And so I'm suggesting that you put the rate 10% or 20%, and if the criteria is met,
what you're saying, a flat tax?
Well,
what you're suggesting, a flat tax?
There are different things that we suggested.
You were talking about digitizing, and I would harken to say that the system is digitized. The discretion of the custom officer is still plays. So how you not digitize his discretion? By establishing criteria. By establishing criteria. If a crash car and it's a certain. But that is already there, Arturo. You have a blue book value.
There is a thing that when they go out and they kick the tire and say, buy half for you and half for me, and this away and pay.
But I don't want to have that discussion here based on these hypothetical positions, because that is what confuses our people. The government has an expense of approximately, right now, if you look at the last budget, about $1.2 billion. Of that, 600 million of that is salaries and emoluments. So almost 50% or 600 million or $50 million a month goes towards salaries. Now, if you say to me, Customs was collecting 400 million a year, and you were saying, well, $60 million is we are not collecting. So I said, okay, 1.2 billion is what I supposed to collect. I have a shortfall of 500 million. How does 60 million close the gap? Okay, close it a little bit. So what is the biggest cost that I have?
Salaries. Salaries and pensions.
So what it is that I should be looking at right now?
What
we suggested is going to help this situation other than salaries.
What we suggested, that pension go up to 65. You could take early at 60, but if you have a strong...
What would that save the government?
It saves the government from...
No, what will it save the government? No, because saying it goes to 65 and delaying people, because that will have its own impact as well.
First of all, this is not a quick fix.
Well, right now government is 55, so
yes,
put it in place. Retirement age is 55.
We have to put it in context. While we want to get the low-hanging fruits, this is not a quick fix situation. You can't just patch it and then move on. It's not, you're not patching no road here. What I'm suggesting to you, that you have to deal with the pensions because we've been kicking it down the road for the last 15 to 20 years. And now it's choking us. So we have to deal with that.
Not
so,
the non-contributable pension.
right.
That government
And then they're
services.
double dipping in terms of the contracts. And if you look at our recommendations, we say, okay, you can't come back with a contract until 5 years after you
But how does that save the government money if it is that
Well,
they need that
because
skill?
if you
If
deal
they
with-
needed that skill.
If you deal with the pensions issue, you stop part of the bleeding. That's one. The second is
No,
the
hold on. Let's back up because again, I don't want to send no
No.
shockwave through
Yeah,
the public
exactly.
service
Uh-huh.
because we are. I
Many
always
public
like us to
officers
be-
work for the pension.
I
and things
understand.
like
No,
that.
I
Yeah,
understand.
it is a
And-
it is a
and-
it is
and
a benefit
certain
that,
things
that
because
public
of it.
officers get, and that is why many of them stay within the service.
That's right.
If you want to get a serious brain drain and you don't have that level of pension there, there's a strong possibility the government isn't able to attract that skill,
The skill
within
that
their
they
services.
need.
Understood. No,
So,
but we're
so
not
there's,
talking
there's a
about-
balance
How you
in
play
it.
the
you
how you
don't,
play that.
you
how
don't, you don't, these people have worked hard for their money, you don't take it away. But what you do is phase in the new hirees. You have a new situation and then you migrate, you migrate the
Okay,
pension.
so you're saying for new hire that you would have more a contributory pension that is
Right.
more equivalent to what the private sector
and that's
must
tied
have
in
in
with,
place.
and that's tied in with social
Well,
security.
how does government right now needs to get through at least 1 or 2 years before the tourism and other areas pick up in terms of
Right.
foreign global economy and others? How does that phase in help government at this point in time meaningfully?
There is not one magic one. That's one.
No, even if we add it up together,
Ah.
this is 1 and this is 2 and this is
But
3.
what-
I'm
what-
trying
what
to
I'm
work
saying-
through your
but
recommendations.
What I'm saying to you, that is one way that we begin to signal to people that we're going to reverse this trend of 135% debt and the balloon, the wage bill. The other one we recommended, for example, if you look at the numbers, if you have 30% shortfall in revenue, a normal business would cut its workforce by 30%. But I am certain that government is not going down that road. So what do? We look at it two ways. Private sector has to inject and invest and create jobs so that you could start paying taxes, and the public service has to accept some responsibility. They can't just go willy-nilly pretending that
Well, the
the world
private
is the
sector,
same.
there has to be that enabling environment created
Right.
for the private sector.
And we've asked,
You can't-
you have to
Okay, go
motivate
ahead.
the
You-
private
you-
sector
exactly.
to invest. You have to motivate them. And how you do motivate them? You motivate them by, for example, you say, okay, anybody build a 5-story building, no pay property tax, like 5 years. How, for example,
But we
let's
have a property tax in the city, for example, when you improve your property, you pay more tax.
but you just asked me how you motivate the,
So you
the
said
private
change
sector.
that.
So I'm saying let's look at the Airbnb. You tax them. If you allow people 1 3-year break, just like how you allow the big hotels concession, people will start building and take the room, they fix up the room, they hire property managers, etc. In preparation for this return to tourism. Solar panels. If you pass a law where people could improve their property by having solar panels and sell back excess on the grid, people invest in home improvement, there will be a lot of jobs provided. So what I'm saying is that the attack on this crisis should be twofold. Motivate private sector to invest and create jobs and self-employment jobs, and try to lower the costs on the public sector side. And one of the big things, like you rightly said, is the wage bill. But I don't believe in a 30% cut. Just because you don't have 30% revenue, you have 30% cut. We figured
can't do that.
if you do 15%, you could save around 60 million over the course of the time, right? And I think that is fair. And if the ministers take 10% cut, then make them go down to 15%, and everybody get that cut, and maybe last 2 years. But you can't say that you want to take the cut and then you'll get it back 2 years or no, because the 135% is still there. The debt is still there. So we're saying, okay, no IOUs, do a 2-year thing, and as the private sector is investing and the jobs are creating, you're paying more tax on this side. The government is collecting electronically from GST, electronically from Bolido, lottery, casinos, every day. Put them on a computer, so every day they deposit the money and they don't hide it, right? So we do it on many fronts, trying to balance and trying to make government stay afloat. We're still not dealing with the debt we're still not dealing with the idea that you have to put a ceiling on how much government could spend. So I believe that if we continue this private sector, public sector consultation for budget every year, we'd be able to put in some metrics and track how well we're doing and move away from that smoke and mirrors and become more transparent in terms of how we promote the figures. For example, what astounded me, I knew we were bad, but I didn't know we were almost 70% unemployed, right? Well, 68% is in the number, which is the underemployed and the ones looking for work.
But in April, 85,000 people applied for unemployment assistance.
That's what the COVID did. It brought clarity to realize how bad it was. But I'm suggesting to you that on the private sector side, we already took our hit. We gone home. We're unemployed. We're looking for food. We're struggling. We're struggling with educating our kids. Right? It's tough all around. So I believe that the burden should be shared equally with the private sector and the public sector and work together to try to create economic activity. For example, one of the things that you just raised was the Melchor thing. I think we could send a signal, just like how we opened the Corozal, we do the same protocols for COVID and we start opening the one in Coyote, Benke, so that they can get employment.
The free zone?
Yes, add more people to the list of who is working. And gradually we identify areas where we can start relaxing. Look, I'm glad Biden win because he can deal with the COVID. The more people get vaccine in the state side, the better it is for us. So I believe that we have till about maybe September, December, and then we will start to see the turnaround. But for right now, the crisis is real and we need to do something, and that something is taking a pay cut, right? But that wasn't just a suggestion out of the air. It is calculating that we need private sector to get motivated and invest and start creating jobs. We need them to pay more taxes as well as tightening up the system in terms of what government is collecting and what they should be collecting.
Is for them to pay more tax or the rightful tax?
Yes.
The rightful tax.
Which one you're
the rightful
asking?
tax. The rightful
More
tax.
taxes are different.
No. I think the system cannot.
More tax me at your carry
they
GST
can't.
up to.
What they collect, there's nothing to collect. Everybody broke. Everybody the home. You know, so that's pointless in trying to pretend that we could raise it. They do it on fuel, right? Because people have.
So who we are going to collect from then, rightfully, if it is that?
Now, how
we're
you
saying?
change the situation, like for example, as described in this text here from a listener. Poor Belizeans buy in Melchor and Chatamal, wealthy Belizeans buy in Miami, LA, and New York. Do your oral research.
Well, one of the recommendations that one of the things that we believe
in line with the board,
is that everybody coming through the airport, because a lot of them got a friend at customs and they pass through. What we should do is put $100 rate. You bring something, you pay $100 US, right, on what is coming in, you know, and they can afford it. I mean, they might say, well, you're picking on me, sometimes I don't bring things, but many people do bring stuff, and it's more than $200 that they have, but they don't get charged for it. So government is indeed losing revenue, so they do a fixed rate. Minimum you're paid, we still look at what you have, and if it's far in excess, we'll charge you the amount, deducting the 100, no?
Well, next one says, so if public officers take a 15% cut, will the banks and courts, BL, BWSL, etc., reduce surveillance by 15%?
Well, one of the things I do agree with a lot of people, the concern was the utilities, BL and WASA, in terms of the high rates. We need to investigate that. The PUC is really not representing the consumer.
But the government owns it, and these companies are not turning profits.
But we need to put
all these companies are bleeding money.
But I believe, for example,
all of them, the three of them are bleeding money.
Why should we have a fancy store up the road and a high-end store in Panama and in El Salvador that a kiosk provide all that services for people who want telecom and a new chip? There is no need for that excessive expenditure. You go in there and you think you're at the airport with 2 security guards, and you press a button, some computer, you take a ticket, and then they announce your name. You know, but all the fanciness, that's wasting money. That DJ campaign marketing was a waste of money. So I'm suggesting that there are lots of ways that even these bodies that are now government owned should also begin to take a reduction in reorganization, cuts. Excuse me. The asset base, they need to evaluate what is the real worth of BTL, what they're going to do with the assets, how they're going to operate, and that should happen with BEL, WASA, and BTL, so that the consumer gets the benefit of lower rates. And I think that is very, very... another thing that was brought up by a member...
When talking about BTL, BTL always stick by here, because there was a time when BTL was making profits, right? And now you tell me that in
government the bailout, government to spend $20 to $25 million for bailout, and that shouldn't be. We can't afford that.
When it was private sector, it was.
You see, as I'm listening to and I see that you're trying to find all these various things that some good in terms of talking about them. It's the implementation. Somebody is saying, where are these institutions that is going to enforce what you're talking about? Because we don't have that institution. We are talking about shrinking the public service. It's some of those same persons that we would want to use to be able to police the system. How are you going to police the issue as it relates to the taxes? You're talking about digitizing, but garbage in, garbage out.
No.
If you don't have the proper mechanism to be able to monitor what goes into the system, then you're not going to get at the back end the outcome you want as well.
But Troy, you and I know that this issue is not about systems more than leadership. We start with leadership.
Okay.
If the Prime Minister signals that we're going to tighten our belts and we're going to look for efficiencies and we're going to...
Hasn't that been done already?
No, but I'm saying, for example, we've seen Senator Lizarraga going over to BTL. I think he's very conscious of what he needs to do in terms of getting that ship right. And similarly with BL and similarly with WASA, right? For example, we have the honor of having a Business Bureau representative on the BL board.
Okay.
Right? Just like we do with the Social Security.
But you all have been... But
we didn't before.
But these watchdogs have been on all boards.
No, but
we talk one at a time because people say talking over each other.
Okay.
But we weren't before. We weren't before. They had removed us from all these participation. Now we are able to participate, and we will become vocal on those boards as to the consumer and in terms of the wastage, and because government cannot afford to continue holding the hands of these boards. For example, why will BL go into electric cars? You know, where are you? I mean, which planet are you on? I suggest that what we need to do is rewrite the law so that you give all consumers to become producers so they could sell their excess electricity to the grid. Therefore, lower the cost. This goes back to one of the issues that you had raised about the quetzal and the pesos and how we deal with the foreign exchange. And one of the realities is we're paying millions of U.S. currencies to the CFE, the Federal Electricity Commission in Mexico. If we had that facility with pesos and quetzales in the banking system, we'd be able to pay in pesos and not U.S. dollars, and therefore ease the U.S. foreign exchange crunch. Even though these things might sound simple, they're innovative and they can be effective if implemented. So what we wanted, and it's kind of sad that people focused on the 15%.
How would the Belizean, how would the DL get peso? How would they walk into a bank with a bag of Belize dollars and give it to the Mexican teller and get peso?
It's very simple.
It's US dollars.
Everybody that come across that border.
I don't like when we have these discussions.
You have a bureaucratic perspective on this issue. If you live at the border, which I did because I started at free zone, people aren't paying in US dollars; they're paying in pesos.
Where?
At the free
He's
zone.
talking about free zone.
I'm saying to you. But if you look at the central bank report,
but
and
it's pegged to something.
Hold on.
If you look at the central bank report,
I will keep you saying.
47% of the re-exports, of the Belize re-exports, goes to Mexico, and that comes from the free zone. 47%. So I'm suggesting to you, if they get paid in pesos and it's deposited, because one of the problems that we have in the free zone is that the banks charge a high rate for them to deposit the money, and they're not taking the pesos. So I'm suggesting to you, if we take the pesos, right, we will be able to use those pesos to pay CFE.
It's not an academic discussion.
I understand that. But we're not doing it, and we're
BL is paying millions of US dollars a year to CFE for electricity. You are saying, go take all the little peso that all these workers and people have there and hold them together and walk across the border.
It's a dynamic.
That will never work.
Look, the same thing they said about free zone before it existed. Mexicans would not come, it won't work. And I'm telling you right now, you're doubting something, Troy. The fact is, millions of people can come over that border, and they will pay And that money can be used, and it's a dynamic thing. It occurs every day, all year round, every year. So we're not talking about academics. I'm giving you a real world example. But then again, right, there will be many people who will look at the list of 30 proposals and not believe, right? But try some of them, and I'm certain that we can ease the situation and help.
We need to take a break, gentlemen, but I wanted to quickly address some questions that are coming in. And so with the permission of our producer, I will just go over them very quickly. But I don't want to give me a long answer to quick to the point.
Sure.
Right? In order to be independent, which believes are not, at least you produce your own food, you import what you cannot produce. That's a comment. Poor Belizeans ban Melchor and Chetumal, wealthy Belizeans ban Miami, LA, and New York. Do your oral research. We did that already. In order to be independent, which means Belize are not, at least produce your own food, you import what you cannot produce. Right? Then another one said that was the most interesting, the one about the Melchor and Miami. Most interesting because it brings up a point about the privilege of importation, which kinds are viewed as acceptable. Right? Feel free to comment on them. It would be interesting to know what figure the cabinet is thinking. Is it 5, 10, 15, 20%, or even 25%? Everyone has the answer when in opposition, but in government they become silent. It is good to say buy local products, but when a poor single mother has only $20 and need to feed her 3 children, nationalism and needs clash, and she is forced to do what is right, buy the cheaper product. That is the reality.
Well, let me put a pin in there. One of the most fundamental things that we need to do right now is commence negotiations with Salvador and Mexico and people on a free trade agreement, which should include trade, investment, health, education, transportation, and we need to do that now. Why? Because, and for example, we have some people that want to do mining, and we have people who want to invest. But if you don't have a framework to give them confidence, they won't. So we need direct investment, both local and direct investment. So that is one area that we need to address immediately. We need to convene a public sector and private sector to start that negotiation. Why? Because it comes back to this single model. If we are able to lower the cost for consumers, everything we buy, most of what we buy from the US come manufactured from Mexico anyway. So why spend US dollars when we could switch, we pivot and start to buy directly from the person who's producing it? I would lower the cost to consumers. What I'm saying is that we need market access, right? We need market access for selling more of our cattle, for selling more of our shrimp, for selling more of our goods. And we also need to have the consumer benefit from a lower price. So that is one thing that free trade agreement or that investment and trade agreement can help.
All right.
Yeah, we'll take the break.
Let's take the break and we come right back.
troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Get up every morning, light, go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, light, go to work from day till night.
All right, it's now 16 minutes to 9 o'clock. Las 9:16 minutos en nuestros estudios. And we're talking to Arturo Lizarraga of the Belize Business Bureau. And Troy, we continue the discussion. But let me just bring up what our listeners are saying here. Why isn't anyone asking how much fuel is used by GOB monthly? Only essential services, ministers and CEOs' vehicles should be on the road after working hours and weekends.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Misuse of vehicle and misuse of government funds. And they shouldn't buy no $300,000 vehicle if they could go right down the road and buy one that's $125,000 for a brand new vehicle that in fact Troy himself has a pickup. Troy himself has a pickup that brand new was $50,000. They shouldn't go and buy $200,000.
Actually, if there's a plan of depreciation and replacement, and so then you could have a good fleet running for a long time. Once you have a proper plan in place.
Any more thing, Chief?
On the issue that you raised just before we were off the air on furniture, we shouldn't be allowing Chinese furniture to flood the market when we have producers, furniture makers. I remember the Business Bureau had about 26 members, furniture maker. And once they passed this policy that allowed China to sell anything on the market, that disappeared. So I'm saying if you want to create jobs, tighten up on the furniture and make the Belizeans make the furniture.
But importation, you could talk about importation across the board. It doesn't have to be just for furniture. We had the discussion at cheese. We talk about seafood. I mean, it could be a wide set of discussion that we could start to limit. But there is a lot of people who build their business on importation as well. So what do you do with that?
Right now, we need to create jobs. Furniture, from the Business Bureau perspective, we've had that interest. We had about 20, 25, 30 members. And we know that could rebound if the government tweak the regulations and allow them to make the furnitures that are in the stores. So I talk from a point of experience. You know, the cheese thing, I do agree that it shouldn't be just one person. It should be all the villagers raising cows, and there should be more people participating.
But if you don't have a market, what's the incentive to do it?
But what I'm saying, Troy, is that there are lots of things we can do. For example, tomatoes, the milk. Get the technology right from next door. Improve your product. For example, let's look on the onion issue. We plant the onions. This man marketing board imported 10 containers to kill the market. What we need to do instead of doing that, allow the farmers to grow, help them with storage, supply chain, so they could store the product, so the prices not go high and low, and then so there's scarcity and sometimes there's none. Introduce supply chain management. Allow producers to grow. Let government become a supporter and a facilitator of these producers. And that has not occurred in the last 10 years.
I like talk about a revolution of the mind. So what does your mindset play? What role the mindset play in all of this?
It is fundamental because we need, it's not the condition, but the decision that you make.
Exactly. Your mind. Mindset.
And we need a country or education system has to be entrepreneurial. It has to provide you for self-employment, not going to look for a job. I want to create my job. But we also, for example, we need to digitize education. For example, it's a lot cheaper. Half of the country doesn't get a high school diploma, and they can't get jobs because they require that diploma. Let's do GED digitally in Spanish and English, so people could get that paper, and then they can enter the university. And let them give more license to new universities that are digital, both licenciatura in Spanish and English, but allow more components in the market, more people to invest in education, and allow a better. And you notice how Galen reduced 20%. It's a very good thing.
Oh, Galen is a very good university. It's a good example of a university.
But it also demonstrates.
I must sell it now.
It's a
very good university.
But it also demonstrates that digitizing also lowers costs. So I'm saying that we need to, the incremental stuff won't get us to correct this. We need transformational leadership, transformational change in terms of, or we need to digitize the economy across the board.
Exactly.
So it's not picking here and picking there, you know.
You need the revolution of the mind, man.
I totally
cannot
agree with you, Chief.
continue the
Totally
same
agree with
mindset.
you.
We have to change how we look at things.
It's not a
All right,
condition.
all right, you feel
Moving
good.
from
You all feel good,
independence to
folks. We have a
independence.
real issue in front of us.
It's a
Right here, right now,
It's a
April
budget.
1, the new fiscal year starts, and the government needs to know where it's going to get its revenue from, first and foremost, and secondly, how it's going, that little bit of revenue that it's going to get, which will not change much from what has occurred 2020, 2021, as far as my projection goes. How does he then manage that shortage
First of all,
and deal with his expenses?
We mentally prepared to take the licks account with it.
Look,
If
how-
you're prepared
politically
politically and
licks.
mentally, well, that's what I mean.
I have never contested public office and don't intend to. The reality is we have to take a cut. What amounts? If we make it too small, it won't have an impact. If we make it too large, it'll hurt. And it has to be graduated. You can't give across the board. It has to be whereby people aren't affected in terms of the bottom line, the plate on the dinner table. Right? You can't hurt the poor man.
So the person who earns $5,000 should not get the same
that earns
percentage
500.
across the board from the person who earns 500.
Definitely not, because that's unfair. And in that category, a lot of the teachers fall in that category. You can't go and hurt the teachers when you could take the pinch on the higher ups. And the higher ups will come with all those.
So does the government have enough time to do all those variation of studies between now and when the budget is presented, which has to be before April 1?
Three of us around this table have been talking about these issues for the last donkey years, 20 years. We know what we need to do. Now we need to pull the trigger. So that's the reality. We need to pull the trigger. We can't stop. We have to stop talk. And I'm saying that the public service has to be responsible to understand, because they know the problem. They know where the shortfall is. They know what part the waste is. And they can start to pinpoint and deal with the waste. So I'm saying to you is it's about a leadership.
So there is an employer and it's an employee. The private sector is the employer. Government is in the middle trying to balance this equation.
It's also an employer.
Government is an employer, but it's the government's employment bill that you have a problem with right now.
Right. So the government,
private sector cuts its bills accordingly. I mean, you know,
absolutely. But the government is the largest employer of the country.
10%.
It's the largest employer, largest single employer. In the country. So if the government does any adjustments at all, it will have a ripple effect throughout the entire economy. That 10% is going to be sucking out of 10% of revenue. So if that 10% equal to $60 million, it means then that the buying power for those persons reduces. So the private sector will feel the lick of that, because government is going to use that for goods and other goods and services or social programs that it's going to produce.
Yes, Troy, but
or maybe nothing at all, meaning that they didn't have the money, so they just had to cut it.
Troy, but the adjustment that you're referring to, that is a big problem. You know, it's an adjustment. It take longer in the public service to make that adjustment than in the private sector. When we hit, we send them home, right? And a lot of them are at home. 70% of them are at home.
A lot of people are still at home.
So, so I'm suggesting to you, Troy, that it shouldn't be just about the cut. It should also be about the incentive that will stimulate in the investment on the local side, and also attract the foreign direct investment.
On the other hand, when you send people home, it creates a sense you're dependent on the government to find the money to maintain you that has been.
But that's why I'm suggesting. That's why I'm suggesting that the private sector has to be stimulated to take that shortfall, to observe some of that hit, so that they can expand and grow the economy.
So if the private sector grows, then it will take on the shortfalls.
Of course, we have to grow. So it can't just be about a cut. It has to be about identifying ways to motivate.
Because if you already have a private sector that is paying let's say 20-30% less or than it should be doing, than it would normally be doing, and then the government adds to that.
But if you give us the reason for us to produce more furniture,
granted, if the government now on the other hand says,
but you have just reduced the buying power of the largest single segment of employees.
But every time the private sector, look, we have to accept something. You know, the private sector is the engine of the economy, and it's the one that creates jobs. The people that are working in public sector,
sometimes the government forget that too, you know.
They are tax collectors. They're not creating employment. They are living off the taxes that the private sector produce. So I'm suggesting to you, for too long we have mash the private sector.
That's
We
where the
need to
mental
allow
change
them.
comes in. That's what I'm talking about, the revolution.
I
of
agree with
mind.
you, Chief.
The
I agree
mental
with you.
change has to come in.
But government have to understand that they just can't talk about, yes, the private sector. They have to
Entrepreneurship
allow
have to
it.
be there at the
No,
day.
but there has to be a much more aggressive move from the private sector. But the private sector cannot also be the one that facilitate or participate in reducing the revenue of the government. You pointed out
No.
about people trying to do all sorts of things to not pay their proper taxes, which is a part of the problem as well, as you have pointed out. So if we are able to say to the private sector that you have to do your part as well, the employees or my public servants are going to take a hit. But at the end of the day, you will now have to start to contribute properly
It should
so that
treat
there
the
can be
GST.
a fair balance.
Put a Walmart type receipt for collect GST. I'll do it electronically where you link it to the initial importation container, and you know if they're doing any leakage, and then you make sure they don't pay in cash, because they're famous to pay cash to the suppliers. Make sure that the supplier can only be paid electronically. So you can't come with no funny thing where they collect the GST and they don't pay government for it. No man, we need to stop that and stop that now.
But
That's one of the first things on the agenda.
What you're talking about may take years to
No
put in
man,
place.
that could happen right now.
Right
Troy.
now, the
That could
public
happen right now.
officers will take a hit one way or the other. I think we are convinced that has to happen.
You have no choice.
We are convinced that has to happen. What other large areas can the government look at in terms of its expense line that it can reduce or cut completely to be able to match the revenue that it anticipated to get?
The repurposing of the public sector is a very important exercise, and I believe that they should tell each CEO, look, the target is how you squeeze 10% waste out of your department, and come back to me with a plan as to what they're doing to make their pay. They can't just sit down and collect their pay, because the Honorable Julius Spot was very clear about that. Identify the waste and send them home. But I wouldn't say quite like that, but that's what needs to be done. They need to give them instructions that take 10% and find out where the waste is and reduce the waste. And come back, and that could be done in 30 days. That is not like brain science. As we keep saying, we've been at this for a long time. We now need to decide. That's simply not Troy.
Well, the horse got out the gate over the last 12 or so years, and nobody reined in that.
The former Prime Minister said after me the flood, he knew that the flood would come, and they should repeat that over the air. That the man said, Jules, without a shadow of a doubt, going into the hurricane, and he created it. He knew what he was doing, and he left us with it. It's a disaster. We should remind people that he led us into this disaster, and it's different from the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I maintain our economic problem is not COVID related. We had the problem before. We were already in a recession prior to COVID. All COVID did was accelerate us. It got us over the cliff even faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
He made it clear.
Yeah. So we were already in trouble. But he was just buying time and smoke and mirroring us as we went along.
Look, I will tell you right this for a public position with the Bureau. The Bureau has been very supportive of the teachers, in terms of when they wanted. You remember we wrote a letter to the Prime Minister in terms of opening schools and stuff like that. And we're also supportive of the teachers in this endeavor, right? The teachers shouldn't take the brunt of the cut. The last thing you do is send home anybody who is a teacher. The last thing you try to damage a teacher.
Yep.
But
we were all taught by a teacher.
Yes.
I think we don't give teachers enough respect.
They're like our parents.
Their parents, yeah. In many
and
cases.
so I believe that they are very responsible. If you hear the leadership saying, you know what, we know, as long as it's fair, we're willing to do it. So I think there is a part of the public service that is willing to be reasonable. And so we survive, because this is a survival issue. It's not an issue as well with
and you're saying no IOUs.
Right. So I think if once that discussion becomes a mature discussion and a mature acceptance of the reality, it'll be easy. Because the rest of the part, the people who were at the leadership of the Public Service Union were part of the compromise. They were part of the problem and continue to be part of the problem, and I don't want to accept it. Right, so I think they're two separate issues. They're two different.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because because yes, they saw it happening under their watch,
And they enjoyed it.
and
They made money off it. They got the perks. They got the double salaries. They got the appointment to the boards. They were part of this. The Mexicans got a good thing, you know. They call it the compromiso. When somebody turn away, when the drug trafficking is happening, or when the politician, because they benefit in some way, they compromiso. And that's the problem, that right now there are lots of people in the system that are compromised with the old system.
but if the public service says no, I won't take any cut.
Then-
So where would that put us as a?
Yeah.
The prime minister don't have the money, so how you pay you? Then you have to go.
So
home
where
if you
does it
want.
put the Belize Business Bureau? I keep saying Belize Business Bureau.
But remember that time when the first name.
Yeah, man, I think that's
what
why it's stuck in my head. I think
better
it's
Belize
trying
Business
to throw us off. But the Belize Business Bureau, where does that put the Belize Business Bureau? The chamber already has a position that they are not for cutting of the
Well, the
salary.
chamber
Because I think the
beyond
chamber
Monday.
is seeing
No, but you have to be
that
clear
the buying
too.
power, these
You-
people
you
are
have
going
to
to go
also-
down and they will not make any money.
But you have to understand that the chairman's position, because they didn't say much in the
We
meeting.
are got a chamber next
Right?
week.
They didn't
Monday.
say much
Monday
at-
they will be on.
They didn't say much except for the Mennonite who said, look, if my farm go bad and I lose money, I have to send them home. And when things pick up, I'll take them back. He was the only realistic person in that room on the chamber side. But what I'm saying is, if you read the letter from the chamber, they're saying if government decides that a cut is necessary, then they won't object. So basically, it's the same position. It's just
But the
that,
government has said that they have not said anything about a cut
right.
so far.
But the chamber was
They
there
said
at the
that
meeting,
those
right?
suggestions of cuts are proposals coming to them,
So-
but they themselves have not taken a position
That
with
is
regards
correct.
to the
But
cuts.
if
of
you-
the-
That is correct.
But
That's the
if-
government position. So we could make that clear and be
No,
fair to
it's
the
clear,
government.
it's
too.
clear,
The
it's
government
clear.
has not said, I want cut.
And the chairman's letter has said that if that is the way to go, they won't object.
After all is said and
So,
done.
so the positions
So the
aren't
private
totally
sectors
different.
are recommending the cut.
No, the private sector believes that is a
That is a
corrective
way,
measure.
but the government has not accepted that. as
No,
it.
they haven't yet.
So I just want to put things in a correct perspective.
But it's not brain science. You know the thing bad. The shelf on the shop peel. You don't got money for buying no more groceries. And I know, because I have 4 kids I have to teach, so I know the struggle for try carry them at school and make sure they get in and find food at the same time. And 70% of our country knows that. Things hard, it's difficult on this side. The other side of the fence need to understand that reality, embrace it, and make we move on.
Well, we're out of time.
Yeah.
So-
So it's not like we have to move on
Yes,
now.
we got to move on. So if there's any
Turo?
closing thing that we may not have covered, or a message that you want to leave us with, and the listeners.
We'd like to thank Love and the public and the members from the Bureau in terms of the input. We know it's hard, but we do have to make the decisions so that we survive. So I'm looking forward to a good, the end of the year will be a lot better than now. So we always have to understand that the sun will rise, and it will rise for Belize. And it's difficult now, but we do have to make tough choices, and it has to be now. So I know that people don't want to hear that, but that is the way it is. And I thank you again.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Duro.
Yeah, certainly. Well, we definitely want to take this opportunity, Chief, to thank Karen, who has been an anchor on a rock
Oh,
for
yes.
some 25 years
Plus, I guess.
plus.
Massimo,
Yeah, I'm just using your calculation.
But
right?
my quick calculation might be more or less, but somewhere wrong there.
Yeah,
Okay.
certainly want to
I
take this
can't answer for
opportunity.
K.
Nothing taken away from Karen. Certainly want to say thank to her this morning for holding over on Love FM. Certainly want to thank William, our master control operator. We want to thank Andrew Jones for streaming and Julia Carrillo, our producer. And certainly want to thank our guests, Mr. Lizaraga. Certainly want to thank all our callers this morning and all of you who viewed us, who listened to us, wherever it is that you are, in your living room, in your cars, those who are streaming, especially those in the diaspora. We certainly glad that you could join us. And certainly we urge you to join us again tomorrow, where we do this all over again, and it's just for you.
Yeah. Listeners tell me it will be hard for CFE to change, as you're suggesting.
But if we have an agreement,
because they do think predominantly in US dollars.
I know, but if we do have the agreement, that's why it's important that we have the free
Well, they
trade
just won't
agreement.
sell us no electricity. That's all will happen. And then we will, because we are the dependency.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm
They're
suggesting
saying that's what they want to be
importance
paid
of the
in.
bilateral agreements will make the basis for these changes. Well, we need to engage that now.
All right. Will take a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need to close off now, right?
Yes, Chief, you have the last word.
Tura, thank you.
Thank you, love, and happy birthday.
Thank you so much too. And you know, these discussions are always welcome. Love is open to all these discussions. So, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Wayne Dyer will leave you with this quote, but as we usually do, we leave with a quote, in
Yes,
the
sir.
morning. Wayne Dyer says, "My goal is not to be better than anyone else, but to be better than I used to be." All right. So how you interpret that one there?
Change starts with us.
The change started us.
Exactly.
Right? So once we change, then the world around us will change. Once we change our way of thinking and our way of seeing things, then the world around us will change, because our world exists in our thoughts, right? So what we have to guard and to be careful of is the way how we think,
Yeah.
right?
The thoughts guide our hearts.
Because our thoughts guide our heart, and not only guide our heart, but guide our actions.
Absolutely.
You got to think of something before you do it, right? So you got to think and try and strive to be better, not to be better than anyone else, because I can't compare myself to you. You are expert in your own field, but I want to be better than how I used to be. I have to improve myself, and by improving myself, then I'm improving my country, my people, and everybody around me. But it starts with me improving myself. So if we want to face all these austerity measures that we are talking about, each one of us have to take responsibility and start with ourselves and make sure that we all get in this together and move forward. Right? It's biblical too. Love your neighbor as yourself.
And when you do that,
more than yourself, it says love your neighbor as yourself. Love
Equally.
God first, though, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Right? And once you love yourself and try to be better than you used to be, then you'll make others better than they are. Right?
Absolutely.
And so, when you do that, you're
We
talking
say-
about love, right?
absolutely, we say,
So when you talk about love, you say,
believe.
please and
And
beyond.
beyond.
Thanks for choosing love. Have
Bye-bye.
a great day.